Skyscraper window cleaners of Reddit. What is most bizarre thing you've ever seen on the job? I once had a bookcase collapse on me in my office. As I was laying on the floor under a pile of books and shelves, I heard a knock. There was a window cleaner at the window trying not to laugh and asking if I was okay. One time in college I answered a help wanted ad for a window cleaner. I thought it was going to be one of these high-rise jobs. Instead, when I showed up the interview, it was some methy looking guy in a parking lot. I spent the day with him going from house to house cleaning people's windows. He told me to pretend I was his nephew and he kept introducing me to customers that way. Then when we were cleaning windows he kept telling me his fantasies of ducking the housewives. It was super weird. Plus, he chewed tobacco and while driving would spit the juice between his legs onto the floor of his ratty truck. Then at the end of the day he told me it was just an audition and tried not to pay me. One of the strangest days of my life. Friend was fresh out of the shower sitting at her computer desk naked when the window cleaners were at her place. She heard a noise, so she turned around to see two men outside her third-story window. So she screams and runs. Later she calls the building management to complain and they tell her that a notice went out and she must not have seen it. Then building management decided to ask the window cleaning service to send those guys to her apartment to knock on the door and apologize to her. Hilariously awkward. I am not a window cleaner, but a paramedic. We got a call once to a suicidal window cleaner guy once. We could see what was going on as we approached. He was swinging around and doing tricks in between each wipe of the window. Like giant swinging leaps and who knows what else. The police had him come down and asked him what he was doing. And he said he just really loves his job. So we told him he needs to be safe and left him to go back to work. Not a skyscraper cleaner, but the person on the other side of the window. I was using a single occupancy restroom on the 22nd floor of a building that had a floor to ceiling glass window along the side of the toilet. Weird, I know. Anyways, I'm taking a wicked crap, and I was wearing a romper. So sitting there in just a bra, with my romper around my ankles, eating my little heart out, I saw the window washer and was a little startled but thought the windows were tinted, it was fine. Alas, we accidentally made eye contact as I was standing up to wipe my ass. Clearly tinting does not work up close. Could have died. Well, I was washing the outside of the windows at the group home I work at. State was coming by later that week and I was super bored. I walk up to one of my dude's bedroom windows to wash it off and apparently he hears me outside somehow even though he had his radio turned up to about 9,000. Like he always does. He rips up his blinds, totes naked, and starts slapping himself repeatedly in the forehead and screaming. This was pretty normal for him. But it's definitely the strangest thing I've ever seen so far in my life while washing a window. I'm not sure why, but while I was working on the 47th floor, the window washers had to open a window. It was like a wind tunnel. Papers were blowing all over the place. Not a skyscraper window washer, but was a janitor who had to wash the windows in a 6-story building as part of my job, so I used a mix of ladders and rappelling down from the roof with a harness to clean the outside windows. One day I was washing the outside windows on the executive floor where all the bosses and higher up employees had their offices. I was done with one window, so I moved to the next window and looked in and saw the CEO of the company snorting something in his office with the door locked and the lights off. He looked up and saw me in the window and we made an uncomfortable eye contact for about 15 seconds, then I just pretended I saw nothing and kept washing the windows. Never spoke a word about it to him or anyone in the office, but the last day I worked there he gave me a farewell card with $200 in it and a free solar powered portable phone charger that the company produced and sold. My uncle is a former window cleaner and he said his most memorable moments were when he lived and worked in Rotorua, which at the time was the crime capital of New Zealand. The most bizarre was when he saw some naked guy, obviously high on something, getting Benny Hill chased up and down a street by the police. The second most bizarre was when he heard a crash, followed by a van tire bouncing down the street that was being chased by a massive Maori guy who proceeded to throw the tire over his shoulder and wander off whistling as if nothing had happened. I was once cleaning a skyscraper where I know nearly everyone that works there. I saw a job interviewer having gay sex with another guy, probably someone he interviewed. The interviewer, who is straight, Married and has kids, gave me $500 not to tell anyone. Easiest money I ever made. My condo building was having the windows cleaned. Being a teenager, I forgot. I was in my room with my girlfriend at the time. I start hearing this noise and think that's weird. There's no floor above us. So I stop and start turning my head. I'm still on top of her, when bam! Ladder appears at my window. Middle-aged window cleaner sees us. Starts laughing. I jump up naked, covering myself, and run for the remote for the automatic blinds. Pressed the button, and stood there in front of the cleaner while my blind slowly VVVVVRRRRRRRRR. I stand there buck naked for a good minute while the cleaner and my GF laugh their asses off. It was a normal morning and I had just began cleaning windows. I'm cleaning one with the blind down, not really paying attention. I realize that the blind is slowly rising, and when it finishes opening I see him. Cricket legend Brett Lee doing yoga. Will never forget that day. 8 men all in an apartment on Reddit simultaneously making this exact post and arguing about how to stage them. Once while cleaning a high-rise apartment, an old lady kindly asked me if I was hungry and proceeded to open her window and hand me a pizza slice. So I sat there, 27 stories up, tangling on my chair and eating pizza. It was a good day. My grandfather met my grandma while working as a window washer. He put his phone number right up against the glass of her office and hoped she wrote it down. She didn't call and they've been married for 60 years. I was visiting my grandparents in a high-rise, looking out their windows a few stories up. As the window cleaners went by, I happily watched them clean, hands folded behind my back, because the windows were a one-way type thing where they were basically mirrors from the outside in. I knew this because I'd seen the building from the outside. Unbeknownst to me, the level of reflectivity changes pretty drastically depending on the time of day, and I realized that when the window cleaners were going by, they had to wash the windows while some weirdo, me, stood about 12 inches from the window watching their form. Okay, so not exactly what OP was asking for, but a funny story nonetheless. I was in medical school on my psychiatry rotation at the local VA hospital. We're in the 6th floor inpatient psych unit seeing a guy with schizoaffective disorder. We were asking him about any hallucinations or delusions he may have been having. And he tells us that he was seeing ropes outside his window and was worried people were trying to get into his room. Seeing that there were clearly no ropes outside his window, we made note of his persistent symptoms and went about our rounds. About half an hour later we get to another patient's room and we suddenly see ropes dropping from the roof down the side of the building. Turns out the poor guy wasn't hallucinating, they were just cleaning the windows. Lol. Not a window washer, but I was working construction on a new tower. A bunch of guys were beating up on the 11th floor to start the day. As I come walking up I can see they are all staring out the window at the tower across the street where this guy's holding up a pair of legs going to town. After the finish is up another dude stands up and all the old boys start freaking out. They were just watching and enjoying two guys getting down. We had just gotten down to the 17th floor of a 30-story apartment building next to Rittenhouse Square in Philadelphia when I realized that I had to take a massive hit. It was pretty much out of the question to take the scaffolding all the way down to the 1st floor and back up to the 17th so I could poop. It would just take too long. Lucky for me the apartments had no residents yet, so I climbed in from the balcony and did my business in one of the toilets. And lucky for me the apartments had no residents yet, so there was no toilet paper. Wound up using some of our microfiber towels we had with us and didn't really have a choice but to leave them in the apartment. I don't clean windows, but I work from scaffolding and do rope access work on high-rise and skyscrapers in Nick all the time. It's not that often I see something bizarre, and I'll see in 200s of apartments a year. So I honestly feel many of the posts in here are made up. Sure, you occasionally see the caught off guard tenant, but if you do see someone they usually just wave and shut their curtain blind. The most bizarre thing I've seen though has to be when I found a section of loose brick about 15 stories up. I removed them to put them in my satchel as usual and found dozens of used condoms shoved behind the brick. Like, how the duck? I still have no idea to this day. I'm not a window cleaner, But I own a pair of binoculars and live across the street from a hotel. I've seen all sorts of strange things. The weirdest had to be this. Looking into one of the rooms, I see a naked man sit down at the vanity and proceed to paint a full clown mask onto his face and wander around the room. He was wearing a bald cap but didn't own a wig. He continued to pace the room for a few minutes, sat down and wiped the makeup off of his face. He then disappeared from into the bathroom. I never saw him again.